Locked On Canadiens, I defend Lane Hutson's honor.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We want to thank everyone for making us your first listen of the day every day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. My name is Laura Sab, also known as The Active Stick, and today I'm not joined by my wonderful co-host, Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Today I've got a very special episode for all of you. It is episode 1245, and a couple of days ago, I sat down with JD Young of Locked On Sharks and Rachel of Locked On Flyers, and we had a little bit of a Calder discussion. We talked about Lane Hutson, Macklin Celebrini, and Matvei Michkov. We talked about our expectations for the rest of the season, who's got the inside track on the Calder Cup and why, and maybe do we have any worries for the rest of the season about any of those players. Obviously, representing the Canadiens podcast, I was talking about Lane Hutson and singing his praises. And without further ado, I present to you the conversation I had with JD and Rachel. Please stay tuned. We had a lot of fun, and I really, really hope you enjoy that.
And now we bring in Laura and Rachel for the Calder death match, ladder, whatever crazy match you want to go with, whatever your WWE heart desires. Laura, Rachel, how are you guys doing tonight?
I want to know if a death match means I have to kill you in order to win my argument. Okay.
That's how death matches work. Haven't you watched wrestling? Scott, I'm sure Scott has given you plenty of wrestling stories that you probably nodded your head and was like, that's great. Yes. So, right. Rachel, who was the best wrestler of your favorite wrestler? No, that's not what we're talking about today.
I haven't thought about wrestling since 1993, probably.
See, that's right here. That's what we're talking about. But we are discussing one of the, I think, most important topics for as our teams are slowly fading into the abyss of the playoff race, or definitely on never had a chance in my case, but the Calder race, right? And three of the biggest names in this year is Matvei Michkov, Lane Hutson, and some dude named Macklin Celebrini. So
who's that?
With 4 nations right now, we thought it would be a great time to kind of check in as we're getting ready to go down the stretch running and kind of make the arguments for each of our players and discuss worries we have and who we actually think is going to win the Calders. So, Laura, we'll go alphabetical by team name. Present the case of your defenseman, Lane Hutson, and why you think he should win the Calder.
Lane Hutson. Honestly, I think the biggest thing about Lane Hutson is if this player was, if he were 6 feet tall, he would get drafted like second overall in his draft, right? He was an absolute steal because of his size. And the thing that the projections were talking about was he going to be able to translate his game to the NHL level given his small size? And my favorite story about Lane Hutson, and I bring this up all the time, is that he showed up to the rookie
the combine,
the Buffalo Combine. I don't know why I was like so prepared to say this, with a letter from his doctor stating that he wasn't done growing. So before
that's adorable. Oh my god!
Like literally the guts to do that. And so my co-host, I asked my co-host before I jumped on, saying, were there any arguments did he have that I could present on his behalf? And he was like, once Lane Hutson is done growing, it's over for everyone else in the NHL as soon as he hits 5'11". So I think the biggest thing about Lane Hutson is that his game is so dynamic. He is such a good offensive defenseman because he's able to keep everyone guessing. His mind works faster than the bodies of most NHL players that he's playing against. And Lane Hutson, to me, like a microcosm of why he deserves this is not just his point totals, which he's sitting atop the rookie scoring race right now, but not in points per game. I understand that. I know you're about to bring that up. Macklin Celebrini is just 1 point behind, having played many less games. But the thing with Lane Hutson is that he started out playing a few minutes a night and then quickly, over the course of a week or so, became one of the most played defensemen. In fact, he was the second most played defenseman in minutes until he then surpassed even Mike Matheson, who, for all intents and purposes, was the veteran of the Montreal Canadiens defensive core, right? And anytime you see something happen, like a player has a bad game or anything like that, like Lane Hutson is always getting the prime position as to who his line mate is going to be or who his defensive partner is going to be. Like, it's clear that Marty today is building games around Lane Hutson, and that means that he's one of the players that overall the team can build around. And quite frankly, we saw a lot of bad hockey from the Montreal Canadiens in this season up until this point. And Lane Hutson was the only bright spot in very many of them. So I think if people are paying attention, there is an extremely strong case to be made for Lane Hutson to be the Calder winner for this year.
Yeah, he is a defenseman, and that dude is racking up points like there's nobody's business. And I always say, like, because the Sharks have a couple small defensemen, those guys, they make it, and if they make it, they're awesome, or they just never get a chance at all. And I think Lane Hutson is one of those guys that, like, you point to and is like, that dude made it. He's going to be awesome. He's going to be awesome for the next, like, 10 to 15 years. So I totally get it. Rachel, one of the most polarizing prospects of the 2023 draft, Matvei Michkov. Yeah. I know a lot of Sharks fans were not happy that they didn't pick him, and I know he's
were Montreal fans.
As were Montreal fans as well. They got their own Russian coming here soon, but Matvei Michkov, of course, it seemed very much like he wanted to be a Flyer. He's a Flyer. He got out of his KHL deal. He's over here. He's doing awesome things. Matvei Michkov, just the rule of cool. Is that why he should win the Calder?
I mean, yes, he is very cool, but also I would like to point out he is also small. He is 5'10" as well. So adjusting at that age to the NHL game, I understand the KHL is a man's league and it's a big boy league. So he's played against bigger, stronger guys for a decent amount of time, and especially last season. But the fact that he's had to come over here kind of on shortish notice and adjust to the North American style of hockey, which is a lot different than the KHL, adjust to a new country, a new language. They're like being away from his family for a significant amount of time. Some of them are over here now, but it's like, this was a huge, huge deal for him personally and as a player. And to be able to have come out this season gangbusters the way he did, scoring, you see him on a regular basis, I think, trying things that the Flyers have not seen in a very long time in terms of creativity. The day he actually scores on the Michigan, I think they're going to have a parade the size of the Eagles Super Bowl parade for that. But I do think, goalies know his MO and they're stopping it every time. It's fine. Yep. We get it. And I also think, like, if you look at it in comparison to these other guys, obviously you can't compare it directly to a defenseman in Lane Hutson, but he's getting on average 3 less minutes per game than Celebrini is of ice time. And to be even in this consideration and in this race with only 4 less points than Celebrini, who is a first overall pick in the draft, like, that is pretty good. That is pretty darn good. And if you look at Russians who have previously won the Calder, the 2 previous Russians to win the Calder were Kirill Kaprizov. How old was he when he came over? 24. Before then, how old was Artemi Panarin when he came over and won the Calder? 24. So for Michkov to come over at 19, now he's 20, and put up the numbers that he's put up, given everything surrounding him and all of that. I mean, I think that's like overcoming some odds here for sure.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Tortorella factor here in a little bit, but it's definitely, and like the Flyers, especially the first half of the season, were definitely kind of in the middle of the playoff race. I know things have slowed down a little bit here, but I mean, you kind of also have to take in team success when it comes to this, and but gigantic 6 foot, 190-pound Macklin Celebrini, apparently, compared to the rest of these guys here. I think for Celebrini, like the case is pretty easy. He's the youngest player in the league by a wide margin, right? 18 years old. He's right around like just under a point per game pace. He's got 40 points in 45 games. He's playing more ice time, 3 minutes a night more. But if you look at the Sharks, who else is going to play those minutes? Like, he is asked to do a lot on it. Yes, a very bad team. A very bad team in the San Jose Sharks. The worst team in the NHL, and they're well on their way to picking first again this year. But Macklin Celebrini makes the Sharks must-watch TV every night because you never know what he is going to do. There's a far cry from last year where, again, watching 82 games of San Jose Sharks last year, I think I should get like some sort of extra payment or like some sort of hazard pay having to slog through that season. Celebrini is much-watched TV. If he gets anywhere close to being a point per game, you know how many 18-year-old seasons there are in NHL history at a point per game? 7 NHL seasons, including guys like Wayne Gretzky, pretty good, Sidney Crosby, Ron Francis, Steve Yzerman, Connor McDavid, to name a few. If you're in that territory as an 18-year-old, I think he's come in and I think he's produced way more than expectations. I think he's can play in all 3 zones, which is something again, like Michkov definitely doesn't have the defensive acumen. Lane Hutson is a good defenseman, but like I think for expectations for Celebrini, even though he's a number 1 all, I think he's surpassing our wildest dreams of what we thought of Celebrini and coming into the league. Yes, no, maybe so. Anyway, so we're gonna talk about kind of our worries about kind of going down the stretch here. Is why our players may not win this Calder. We'll kind of discuss some of the big factors going into it. And then we'll eventually get to who we think wins the Calder and the big bad wolf up in Calgary who might steal this whole thing from beneath us. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the greatest protein nuts, serving with 1 ounce of servings for 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling full longer. Personally, I like the ones with the shells. I know some people don't like the shells. I like the shells. I like having to work for a little bit, but then you get that nice crack, a little bit of salt on there, and you are good to go. Plus, I always build little walls with the shells, and I just think it's fun to play with Legos behind the little walls because I'm a child. Anyway, get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, before we continue on, of course, I want to thank you guys for making a Locked On Canadiens, Flyers, and or Sharks. Or if you're listening to all 3 at the same time, good for you. Thank you for making us your first listen. When you're done listening to us, go check out one of the other great shows here at the Locked On Network, including Locked On Fantasy Hockey. If your fantasy hockey team needs some help, they got you covered. Who to add, who to drop, who to pick up, all that fun stuff. You can find that show wherever you listen to this show, or you can watch on YouTube as well. All right, Lane Hutson, Laura. What is your biggest worry kind of going down the stretch here? As we know, the Canadiens starting to kind of fade a little bit. Probably the playoff hopes are on life support here. What's your biggest worry with Hutson?
So I think this is the most Lane Hutson has ever played, obviously. That's not a secret. I think he surpassed that a few games ago. People are starting to worry about Lane Hutson getting tired. If you ask him, though, he loves to play hockey. The more you throw at him, the more he'll do. And literally, if you ask him to be a forward, he'll do it. I'm pretty sure if you ask him to play goalie, he'll strap on the pads and get in there. He keeps talking about how much he loves his first NHL season because of the amount of hockey he gets to play. But we saw, I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 games before the break, we saw him falter a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he put 2 bad games together in a row. And honestly, with Lane Hutson, it's like, what do you have to do a bad game? Like maybe just not score a point in that one game. It's, and I think the worries are a little bit, can he get used to this. This is his rookie year, right? So if he is going to go through that growing pain and that like energy crash or whatever, it's good that he's going to do it this year when the Canadiens don't really have a hope of making the playoffs, right? Because next year they have to make the playoffs. Like the plan is they have to make it, right? If they don't, it's a lot of questions that the front office is going to have to answer. So I think for me, it's the tired factor. Obviously, with a 2-week break, he's going to be able to recover a little bit. But the hockey is also played between the ears, and if he gets mentally tired, I think that's the biggest concern in terms of like what he's seen as in terms of Calder potential. I think the fact that the Canadiens are so bad, and also the Canadiens aren't really a nationally televised team in the U.S. and only sometimes in Canada, not all the time. So, the people who vote on the Calder might not be getting exposed enough to him and what he does. I do see that the media does talk about him a lot as a bright spot, but it often feels the mainstream media feels a little bit uneducated as to what he truly brings. I think it's really localized, like what the true appreciation for him. So those are really my concerns about him. But I do think that it's a good growing season for him.
Yep.
And, I'm just excited to see what's next, to be honest.
Noted small market Montreal. When will you guys get someone to cover the team? Can we get someone to cover?
Can he play defense, Laura? Can he actually play
people
defense?
keep bringing that up, that he's offensive, but like so many nights he's actually the best defenseman on the team. But that's also because most of them are not very good defensively. But you've watched his game grow in that area as well, particularly in the last few weeks. I would say early in the season, maybe there were a lot more question marks, but in the last few weeks, he has been able to make his game a little bit well-rounded. Like I said, you ask him to do a thing, he's going to do it. So, you never know what you're going to see from Lane Hutson.
Yeah, no, I think for Lane Hutson, right? I've always said it. Anybody listens to Locked On Sharks, defenses for nerds, go score points. The best way to play defense is not to have to play defense, right? If you keep the puck in the other zone and you keep the pressure on, you don't have to play defense. And Lane Hutson is he's a good defenseman, but he's really good at doing that. And I think people underrate that part of it. It's like, yeah, the best way to play defense is not to have to play defense. So, Rachel, is it the John Tortorella is the hanging over this with Michkov? And we've seen him get benched a couple times here. I know he's been a healthy scratch here before. We've seen, missing kind of periods. Is that kind of why maybe Michkov might not be the guy?
Yeah. And first off, I am not worried if he doesn't win the Calder. I am not worried if he's not even like second in the voting. Like maybe third would be nice. But honestly, like for him and his development,
Yep.
like I think that's more important than any award for sure. And while it's great and fun to have him in this conversation, I'm not worried either way about it. And I don't think he is either. And I think, there is the John Tortorella factor. Like you can't deny that. But I do think that there's something to be said, maybe not as much as he's benched him, but for rookies to sit a game every now and again to watch and see what's happening, to look at video and learn, grow and develop. And John Tortorella's system requires a lot of defensive focus. That is not Matvei Michkov, right? And so, in fact, we did an episode very recently that I put on the thumbnail graphic, "Let Michkov be Michkov," right? Because that's how you're going to get the most out of him. And I think they're coming around to that a little bit more. They kind of let him loose the last couple of games. He scored a couple of goals. He looked much freer out there in the last 2 games before the break. And so I think as long as they continue to let him be himself and be creative and try the Michigan, bless his heart, and do all of those things and maybe try and have a power play that puts him in the best position to do all of those things again, I think he's going to be okay development wise. Like I only worry if they try to tamper that down again any more significantly than they have thus far. But yeah, again, being in the Calder conversation is just kind of icing on the cake for me, for him. I think he's going to be an excellent player and a huge part of the team's future. So, the worries are small in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's that trying to find that meeting point between Tortorella system, and then Michkov. Like, you don't draft this
Mhm.
guy who's a lot of people thought outside of Connor Bedard might be the best player in the 2023 draft, right? And even in the end, like, there could be a really nice debate between Michkov and Bedard, and when we get to that point of
Yeah,
their
but
careers.
if you
But
notice the way he played in the KHL, he cheated a lot.
yeah,
He really did, and you can't do that in the NHL. So, like, that's a huge adjustment to make from
yes.
being a constant cherry picker to basically never being able to do that. So, like, the expectations are realistic, I think. We all know he's a great player, but it's gonna
Can
take
you
a
just
little bit of time.
try in the I think, like, can you just try the defensive zone? I think it's probably the Tortorella. Like, just try the defensive zone, and then if you can score a bunch of points, then I think everybody
Yeah,
will be
he's
happy, right?
intercepted a few pucks here and there. Like, he's
There
doing
you
that
go.
kind of stuff. So,
Yeah. I think for the Sharks, the one worry, well, two worries I think I have for Celebrini in this is one, the West Coast bias, which, like, is a legit thing. Like, how many people, like voters and stuff like that, um, watch Sharks games that come on at 10:30 Eastern time for you guys. I know poor Laura just had to go through the swing here. Rachel, hopefully you're done, right? Are you done with the West Coast swings? You got one more.
no, we're done now. I had one
Oh,
last
there you
game
go.
in Utah, and that was it. Thank God. Whoa.
So, I know Sharks have one more East Coast swing. They're my favorite because games come on at 4 p.m. I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. But again, like, if you're some random voter and games come on at 10:30, they don't end until 1 a.m. for you, like, you're not staying up to watch that. And if you check the box scores and he doesn't score, like, you're like, okay, whatever, Celebrity didn't do anything. So I do think that is a bit of a thing you have to worry about. But I do think the NHL does a pretty good job of kind of highlighting. I feel like we're getting way more Sharks highlights on their Instagram and stuff that we have in the past few years of covering the Sharks just because of Macklin Celebrini. So hopefully that can help balance it. I do worry though with Celebrini. Again, he's 18. I'm glad this break came when it did, because just like you mentioned with Lane Hutson, right? This guy's playing the most amount of games he's played in his life. You started to see some uncharacteristic kind of mental mistakes from Celebrini. And hopefully this 2-week break gives him that time to kind of reset and stuff, as these guys are, again, going from playing 40 games. For Celebrini, it's probably going to be like mid 60s with the month he missed, began the season with an injury. But you started to see some kind of uncharacteristic mental mistakes. So hopefully he's not getting too worn down, especially now that, like, Mikael Granlund's not there, and the Sharks just don't have a lot around him, and he is asked to do so much stuff. Like, he is the engine for this team right now, which is insane, again, for an 18-year-old to kind of be the face of the franchise already. So I think, though, the kid's a special kid. I think he's going to continue to produce, and I think he's going to be right around that. Maybe not a point per game, but I think he's going to be right around that line, all said and done, just because, again, he plays a lot, and he's started to play on the penalty kill now, like, which is just, again, he plays a lot. So, but that's my big worry is the mental fatigue and just the West Coast bias of just people not seeing how special Macklin Celebrini is. So we're going to have a discussion. We're going to try to figure out who actually wins this thing. And again, the big bad wolf in Calgary who might steal this whole thing from us. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. If you're like me, I hate meal planning. With Factor, they make it super easy. They have all the meals right there. You just pick which ones you want. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, kids, let's wrap this bad boy up. Who wins the Calder? Laura, who do you think actually wins this thing?
I think it has to be Macklin Celebrini, because you did mention the highlights, and I think we're talking about like journalists and whoever votes on the Calder, looking at it is the journalists, right? It's not the GMs. The GMs vote for the Vezina.
Yeah.
So for me, I
It's me.
think
I'm the only voter, so
the
yeah,
voter,
sorry,
yeah. So it's going to
guys.
be Macklin Celebrini. It's just who's most likely to come up in highlight packages, right? Because a lot of them might not be watching or looking at the NHL's Instagram, but they're probably rounding up the nightly highlight packages, right? Like who's most likely to come up there? He is the first overall pick. He is literally the closest to the point per game at the moment. Um, I think he is the big name, so it would take a lot for someone else to kind of knock him off. But I do think that Lane Hutson will likely come in second, just because like how can you not when he's a defenseman playing the way that he is and becoming such a linchpin for a team where you know like they literally have no other defense or not great defense, let's say that, and especially with Caden Gooley out, right? Like it was those were the two guys you could rely on. Now one of them has a gruesome injury that I don't even want to tell you guys about. So
Yeah.
I think Lane Hutson really does have a shot, but I think Celebrini has the inside track just because of who he is.
Rachel, are you same thing? You think it's Celebrini?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be. Those were all excellent reasons why.
This
And I
podcast
think,
is done.
well, I think when a first overall pick lives up to expectations, I think that's a very rare and special combination that makes people just want to vote for him,
Yep.
right? It's like, even like with Bedard, I feel like it was pretty similar, right? Even though Bedard probably had a bit more of a struggle than I think Celebrini has had this season. I think Celebrini has thrived in a lot of ways on a bad team in a way that Bedard did not in some instances. And so when you add that layer onto it, where he has actually, I think, done better overall as a player than Bedard did, like what else are you going to do but vote for him, right?
Yeah. No, it's fair. I mean, I can't not vote for Celebrini if I was voting, but one thing though, Dustin Wolf, right? The
Mm.
goalie from Calgary. Calgary fighting for the playoff lives. A team who I thought might be one of the worst teams in the NHL this year.
Same.
I legitimately thought they might be one of the worst teams in the NHL. He right now is got this team fighting for a playoff spot. Are we just maybe not talking about Wolf enough? I know, Rachel, you are ready to go for the Dustin Wolf stuff, right?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I've thought about this, and I will also credit my Locked On Flyers co-host Russ Cohen with being on the Dustin Wolf train, because he is definitely there too. Now, I will say he's had a rough February, like 4 losses, and that has diminished his numbers a little bit. Not
Mhm.
as enough that I don't think he could necessarily like not crack the top 3. I think he can still crack the top 3 in voting for the Calder, no doubt. But he's 19-11-3 in 33 games played, 2 shutouts, a 907 save percentage, a 2.63 GAA, which is excellent goalie numbers for a rookie. Now, is there an asterisk next to that rookie designation? Sure. Should there be for a goalie? Probably not, to be honest. I
Mm,
think there's a difference between a
I
skater
agree.
and a goalie
I agree.
rookie
yeah.
for sure. Now, so right now, he is 11th in save percentage and 15th in goals against average in the NHL overall, not just rookies, but in the NHL overall for goalies who have played 18 or more games to this point, which is really good. You look at the last goalie to have won the Calder, which was Steve Mason back in 2008, 2009. He was 10th in the NHL in games played, 16th in save percentage, which is worse than Wolf is right now. He was 44th in goals against average, below league average at 2.29. So you compare that to 2.63. It's not that far off. The big difference with Steve Mason that year, which is what won it for him, is that he had 10 shutouts. that season. It was a phenomenal season for Steve Mason. He was also 4th in the Hart voting and 2nd in the Vezina voting that year. That was like a absolutely bonkers year for Steve Mason, but the underlying numbers are pretty similar there.
No, it makes sense. And even you look at goals saved above expected, Money Puck has him 18th in the NHL at 9.8. Like he has more goals saved than expected than Jake Ottinger. No, he is absolutely insane. Super great guy, Bay Area native Dustin Wolf, but like, even compared Dan Vladard, his own, teammate, minus 4.2 goals saved above expected. Like what he is doing for Calgary to kind of, and yes, they're getting a lot of guys kind of performing much better, but he is really steadied this team, which I thought was going to be, I thought he was going to struggle this year behind that defense and behind that team, which doesn't really have, a lot of stars. I know they got Hubert over there and, and Uyghur and stuff, but like after last year, I thought that team was well on their way to full on just burning it down and starting over, and he was going to be stuck behind this brutal defense. But no, the kid is great, and he's more than deserving to be in the conversation. And if he leads Calgary to the playoffs, like into a playoff run that again none of us thought was coming, like you have to, I think there's gonna be a really, really strong argument for him to get some first place votes here.
Yeah, I think that making the playoffs is the big difference factor, because I mean, you're not alone in thinking that Calgary was going to be terrible. I thought they were going to be like picking 2nd overall, to be honest, or 1st even. I thought they were going to be a terrible team, and like literally 20 games into the season, I kept asking like, why is
When's this
Calgary so
happening?
good?
When's this going to fall apart?
Yeah.
Well, and the answer was always Dustin Wolf. So I think if he does lead them to the playoffs, there's the argument can be made, because everybody has to take notice, and because he is the primary driver. Yes, other players are playing better than they did last year, but he's the primary driver behind their run.
Yeah, they're right now they're 3 points behind the Canucks, and with the Canucks, the hope is Quinn Hughes comes back from 4 Nations and is healthy. But like that Canucks team, man, like it's always something with them.
They're a crapshoot for sure.
You never know. And like Calgary, as weird as it feel, like they're just a much more steady team right now. Like they're going to play hard. You're going to get good goaltending from Dustin Wolf, and I think they're going to be in it to the end. So, but yeah, I think it's Celebrini's award to if Celebrini didn't miss that first month, I think this thing would have been
wrapped up
by now for Celebrini. But yeah, this was fun, kids. Laura, where can the people find you?
So you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. We are on all the socials except for Twitter at Locked On Canadiens. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Blue Sky. And you can also email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. And if you are one of our listeners, please send us mailbag questions at all of the places I just mentioned.
Yeah, you guys, weekly mailbag. Salute to you, to Ant. That is a commitment. So
we also have a weekly mailbag at
oh my goodness. I think I've done like one in like 6 months.
Why do you hate your listeners, JD?
Yes, why do you hate your listeners?
They trust me to come up with good content, and I do. I think I do.
Yeah, we do ours on Wednesdays, and you can ask us those mailbag questions or give us your Flyers thoughts.
I have a mailbag question
Flyers.
you can answer. Why is John LeClair's jersey number not retired? It is blasphemous that his number 10 is not up.
He is in the Philadelphia Flyers Hall of Fame, so that's like the step before you get your jersey number retired in Philly. We'll see.
Somebody's wearing 10
He's also
right now.
a player development coach with the team right now.
So. I mean, Patrick Marleau works for the team. His jersey's up there. So, that's why. Yeah. Anyway, that's my mailbag question. Why is John LeClair? I'm demanding as a childhood Flyers fan with Eric Lindros and John LeClair as my 2 favorite players. Why is John LeClair's jersey not retired? Anyway, that's my question.
Because you abandoned the team, JD. That's why.
That's why. So, anyway, you can find Locked On Sharks wherever you are listening to this podcast. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at my Fry Hole. No mailbag questions. You guys get what I give you. So, until tomorrow. Bye, friends.
Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you all tomorrow.